Welcome to Michigan's WW1 Centennial News Report for August 2018. Over here, Michigan's WW1 Centennial event. The State Report. On Wednesday, August 1st, the WW1 Maquette, a 1/6 scale model of the wall that will be in Pershing Park to serve as a WW1 memorial, arrived at Michigan's Military Heritage Museum in Grass Lake, Michigan. It was quickly assembled and put on display. From the WW1 Centennial Commission, Director of Veteran Service Organizations David Hammond came out to represent the Centennial Commission. Michigan's WW1 Centennial event, Over Here, was held the weekend of August 4th and 5th in Grass Lake, Michigan. The two venues were the Cole House, which hosted homefront activities, and Michigan's Military Heritage Museum, which hosted the military activities. During Michigan's WW1 Centennial event, Over Here, 3 Michigan residents were honored with a Certificate of Excellence. They were Chuck Marshall for photography, Brenda Stott Foster for writing, and Scott Garish, who is a manager of the Michigan Military Heritage Museum and who hosted the Over Here event. On November 11th, 2018, at 11 a.m., the armistice bell ringing ceremony would take place. In 1918, on the 11th day in the 11th month, at the 11th hour, the Allies and Central Powers agreed to a ceasefire that would mark the end of the World War. The National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. will hold a bell ringing ceremony at 11 a.m. on Sunday, November 11th, 2018, to commemorate the centennial of the armistice. Local churches, schools, courthouses, and other entities are invited to participate at the time of this nationwide occasion at each respective time zone. It is with high hopefulness that we will all join in this nationwide commemoration in hope and prayer for a perpetual, world-lasting peace. For information, contact Jerry Benson, 517-373-2353. Just a reminder to check the latest events for Michigan's WW1 Centennial. Please go to ww1cc.org/Michigan. 1 century ago, August 1918. On August 1st, 1918, British troops entered the Russian port of Vladivostok on the Pacific Ocean. On August 2nd, 1918, the Japanese Army announces that it's deploying troops to Siberia, landing in Vladivostok. August 3rd, 1918, the British landed at the North Russian port of Archangel. The British were supposed to be guarding supplies that were shipped to the Russian forces before they surrendered to the Germans. On August 4th, 1918, Adolf Hitler receives a German Iron Cross First Class for bravery. It was recommended by his platoon leader, Lieutenant Hugo Gutmann, who was Jewish. On August 6, 1918, General Ferdinand Foch is promoted to Marshal of France, the highest-ranking officer in the French Army. August 8, 1918, began the Battle of Amiens, also known to the French as the Third Battle of Picardy. It was the opening phase of the Allied offensive, which was to be called the 100 Days Offensive, which ultimately led to the end of the First World War. On the first day, the Allies advanced over 7 miles, the largest advance of the war. The battle was also notable because of the morale. Large numbers of Germans surrendered that first day, August 8th. General Erich Ludendorff describes it as a black day for the German army. On August 13th, 1918, a declaration of war against Germany was made in the name of the Czechoslovaks as a people. On August 18th, 1918, marked the last day of the bombardment of Paris by the German long-range cannon known as the Paris gun. This long-range cannon could send a shell over 75 miles. On August 21st, 1918, the Second Battle of the Somme and of Bapaume began. This was part of the Allies' 100 Days Offensive to end the war. On August 23rd, 1918, Russian general and anti-Bolshevik leader General Horvath seized control of all of Siberia and its military forces. This was done by a coup d'etat. On August 31st, 1918, the German army evacuated a key position known as Mount Kemmel, just west of Kemmelberg in Belgium. From the heights of Mount Kemmel, the Germans could direct artillery against the Allied forces, stopping any advances. On August 31st, 1918, at the British Embassy in Moscow, Russia, Royal Navy Captain Francis Cromie was killed by gunfire. Apparently, the Soviet secret police had entered the building and a firefight erupted, and Captain Cromie was killed by gunfire. Over here, Michigan's WW1 Centennial event took place Saturday and Sunday, August 4th and 5th in Grass Lake, Michigan. It was hosted by the Michigan Military Heritage Museum. At 10 a.m. on Saturday, August 4th, at the Michigan Military Heritage Museum in Grass Lake, Michigan, a flag-raising ceremony was conducted. The invocation was given by Major General James Mukayama, Jr. Major General Mukayama also presented Michigan WW1 Centennial Certificates of Excellence to Chuck Marshall, Brenda Stott Foster, and Scott Garrich. One of the unexpected highlights was the arrival of about 20 women veterans on their motorcycles. You can see here General Mukayama getting a ride on one. The feature of the WW1 Centennial event was the arrival of the WW1 Maquette, which was on display in Michigan's Military Heritage Museum. You can see it behind David Hammond from the WW1 Centennial Commission, Major General James Mukayama, and Dennis Skupinski, Chairman of the WW1 Centennial Commission for Michigan.
The architect is Joseph Weichenauer, who won the jury competition in 2015 for his design. He was at that time was a young architectural student at University of Arkansas, and he chose as his partner a world famous artist by the name of Sabin Howard, who works in bronze, and the two of them paired for the design. And this depicts a soldier's journey, and the theme, as the pair researched, is common in every culture in the world. So, even far back in history, recorded history, it's the same story being retold over and over again, and picking it in terms of embracing it into the World War I theme was his inspiration. So you have a soldier who's leaving his family as he's called to go to war for his country, and he's apologetic as he's kneeling before his daughter that he has to leave, and then his wife, you could see, is torn between having to look after the home front as symbolically, but also you can see her feet and body are one direction while her head is the other direction as he's leaving, and he joins arms with his mates to go into training to become a soldier, and still in the United States at this time. And then the next panel depicts them in France in battle for the first time. And most of these guys, as you well know, never even made it to the county next to where they live, let alone go overseas. And you can see by the expression on the faces how it changes from, more of a tranquil mindset into kind of an animal ferocity to show that, this is what's needed to be effective warriors. Iconic symbol of going up over the top of a trench and attacking. The artist, in fact, took his inspiration from the Marine Corps Sergeant Dan Daly, who allegedly said, "What's wrong with you sons of bitches? Do you want to live forever?" As in the Battle of Belle Wood. And so he used flag models to do this. Took about 20,000 still shots in order to get the right expressions, and obviously to get the right physiques and the form of the age-appropriate people. And you can see in the background his comrades are falling, and he himself falls in this panel. And has helped his comrades, and then is gassed, has to cover his eyes because of the effect of the gas. And at this point, we introduce a nurse. There were 100,000 women in France during the AEF's experience in all kinds of different roles. We have the Hello Girls who were out in the Signal Corps, that were what is today a combat support unit in the Army. They were up very close to the front, in some cases at the front, when they had to follow the Pershing's headquarters around. And we had volunteers that ran canteens, we had women ambulance drivers, we had women clerks, and we had women volunteers to set up places for men to have recreation during the war. So it's symbolic of I think, just the role of women in the war. And at this point, you see, this is the very first time that one of the characters in this story is actually looking at the audience. And when this is built, it's going to be high so that you have to look up at it as a way of looking at larger than life. And he is experiencing what we would call today PTSD, or the shell shock of its day, and seemingly not knowing what to do, the 1,000-meter stare, as Sabin Howard calls it. And at this point, you can see the debris in the background, how it's rising almost upward to the point. And at this point, this is where we leave behind an agrarian society as Americans, and have now thrust ourselves on the world stage. And the American century is now an industrial power. And in terms of proportionate of height, then it continues up to the top of the flag where it reaches the highest point of the whole design here. He's helped by his buddies to get back. And in this panel, in a symbolic parade, as they make it back to the United States and are welcomed home by all Americans. And in the final panel, he hands his helmet to his daughter as symbolic to passing to the next generation that has to fight the next war. And the entire episode here, or at least in the tale it's told, is called A Soldier's Journey. The wall will be 10 feet high when it's constructed. The figures are 7 feet tall. It'll be approximately 56 feet wide in Pershing Park, where there's already an existing statue of General Pershing, with two granite walls behind him. One depicts his life, and the other depicts the campaigns of the First World War. So those will be renovated and spruced up and cleaned up. He's looking directly at where the wall will be, which is the other end of the park. There'll be a walkway to go over a water feature. Then there'll be a water separation between the wall and the bystanders. And along the edges is a kind of a steps features to go down where you can sit and pause and reflect and look at the various aspects of the landscape and all.
At the Michigan Military Heritage Museum, we had original World War I items on display. Collectors came from all over Michigan and the Midwest to display their items. Some of the items on display were cots. We had a number of machine gun carts. We also had personal gear, weapons, helmets, and uniforms. Besides the museum's extensive collection, it was nice to get a chance to see other items such as a World War I German trench mortar, and other items that soldiers used during the war. We also had a large collection of World War I souvenirs such as barbed wire, swords, etc. During the World War I Centennial event, we also had a number of authors and actors present. The authors usually wrote about their grandfather, either biographical, or in a novel form, relating their experiences during the First World War.
One brief little anecdote about a member of the Signal Corps, which we were, that you might not have heard about. Did you know that the British, they gave our units trained pigeons to pass along messages, because not everybody had even the field telephones, or telegraphs, either one. And I'm going to tell you that you may have heard about a group that was trapped behind enemy lines. Have you ever heard of the Lost Battalion in the Argonne Forest? I'm seeing a few heads nodding. For those of you who don't know, they were trapped there, no food, no water, other than what they had carried in with them. And as a result, they were stuck. There were German sharpshooters who could see them and pick them off. If they tried to go down to the river, they would be killed. And so eventually orders were given. Anybody who tries to go to the river, you're going to be court-martialed. That's assuming you live long enough. Well, they did have these pigeons to try and send out messages. And I have the message that their commander sent out on the first pigeon. They had 3 pigeons for their unit. The first one had this banded onto his leg. Many wounded we cannot evacuate, because they were taking friendly fire. Is fire ever friendly? Not really. But anyway, he sent that message up. Up goes the pigeon. Boom! Down comes the pigeon. Pigeon number 2 of their 3. Up goes the pigeon with this message. Men are suffering. Can support be sent? Up goes the pigeon. Boom! Down comes the pigeon. Their final pigeon goes up with this message. We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it! Up goes the pigeon. Boom! Third pigeon. And they sit and they think they're done for. Later on, by cover of night, that third pigeon manages to fly and get the word through.
Besides actors and authors, we also had reenactors dressed up in military uniforms from the First World War, acting the parts of soldiers. They also answered questions for the public. We also had veteran organizations and veterans there, keeping the memories alive of those who served before them. We also had the youngest documented person to view the WW1 Maquette, baby Kaz, who was just over 5 months old, with his mother, from Farmington Hills, Michigan.
A silly German sausage of Napoleon he'd be. Then he went and broke his promise, it was made in Germany. He shook hands with Britannia, and eternal peace he swore. This naughty boy, he talked of peace while he prepared for war. He stirred up little Serbia to serve his dirty tricks, but naughty lights and Liège quite upset this dirty dick. His luggage labeled England and his problem nicely set. He shouted first of Paris, but he hasn't got there yet. For Belgium put the kibosh on the Kaiser. Europe took the stick and made him sore. On his throne he hurts to sit, and when Jumbo starts to hit, he will never sit upon it anymore. For Belgium put the kibosh on the Kaiser. Europe took the stick and made him sore. Now he's laid it in the woods. We won't buy his German goods, and we'll never drink his lager anymore. The early boats and warships, and they sailed upon the sea. They looked a pretty sight when you certainly see. When they hear the Kaiser said, be careful, if they've seen that every man of war I have shall be a submarine. He chased his ships to Turkey, and the Kaiser startled stood. He scratched his head and said, don't hurt, you see, I'm watching wood. In Turkey bought the warships just to aid the German plot. But be careful, Mr. Turkey, or you'll do the turkey trot. For Belgium put the kibosh on the Kaiser. Europe took the stick and made him sore. And if Turkey makes a stand, she'll get Turkey and Japan, and it won't be on the Kaiser anymore. Well, he'll have to.
Mademoiselle Marmotier, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Marmotier, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Marmotier hasn't been kissed in 40 years. Ingy-dingy, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Rungaberry, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Rungaberry, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Rungaberry, kissing soldiers 1, 2, 3. Ingy-dingy, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Marmotier, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle Marmotier, parlez-vous? Won herself the Croix de Guerre for washing soldiers' underwear. Ingy-dingy, parlez-vous?